In this video, I'm going to be going over tools. Tools are going to be things in your game like weapons, potions, or other items that the players hold in. So to get started, I'll go ahead and add a tool here. And you can see it has much of the same properties that models or parts would have, but with a few additional options. Starting at the top here, level of detail. If your tool is a mesh part, then you can change the level of detail. Tooltip, so this is a message that will be displayed to the player when they mouse over the tool in their backpack. In this case, I'm going to be making a sword, so I'll just say this is a sword. The texture ID, this is again if you're using a mesh part, then you can set a texture for the mesh. The grip, this is how the player is going to be holding the tool. And for this, I'm going to be using the Tool Grip Editor plugin because it makes this much easier to align the grip correctly. Then there's also a primary part and some other options. And then lastly, there's some options specifically for the tool here. So if you can drop the tool or not. If this is enabled, then the player will be able to drop the tool with the backspace button. Manual activation only. So if by default, if this is disabled, then the player can activate the tool when they click with their mouse. If it's enabled, then the tool will only be activated by a script. Model streaming mode. This has to do with if you're using a mesh part. I'm not entirely sure what this does, but it has something to do with the mesh part, the way it looks. Requires handle. Most of the tools that you're going to be making will need a handle. If you're making something like a sword or something, then obviously the player needs a handle to hold on to. But if you're making something like a jetpack, then the player won't necessarily need a tool or won't necessarily need a handle for that. Enabled, so this is just if the tool can be activated or not. If it's disabled, then the tool cannot be activated. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to be go ahead and make a sword here to be the tool. So this will be the handle first, and make sure you name it handle, just like this with the uppercase H. And make sure you turn off can collide and can touch. Then I'll just make it look more like a handle by making it brown and leather. And then make it more in the shape of a handle. Making it something like that. Now I'm going to move this handle inside of the tool. And then I'm going to set the primary part to the handle. Now I'm going to duplicate the handle with Control D and then move it here. And this is going to be the blade. So make sure you rename it. You don't want it to be called handle as well. So you can just call it blade or whatever you want to call it. And then I'll just make it look like a blade. That's good enough for now. Now all I need to do is weld the blade to the handle. And yep, just make sure they're both cannot collide with anything. So the blade you do want to have can touch on, so I'll just enable that. And now lastly, I'm going to look at the grip for the tool. So this will help determine which way the player is holding the tool. So again, you can do this in here, but it's pretty difficult to get the numbers just right, so it's much easier just using a plugin like this. So now I can just easily see how it's going to look when the player's holding it. And pretty much I just want it like that, so they're holding it just straight up. And then lastly, I'm going to add in an animation here. So this is just an animation I made. Okay, we just need the asset ID actually. So I'm not too sure what this is, but all we need is the ID, or we can just add in an animation. Just like this. And then I'll paste in the ID here. Okay, now lastly, to make this tool work, I just need to add in a script. And this is going to be in the starter pack. So first I'll just define the tool. And then I'll get the player from the tool. So the player is going to be the parent of the tool, because the parent would be the backpack, and then the parent of the backpack would be the player. And then I can just get the character as well from that. Okay, so now I'm going to load the animation onto the character's humanoid. So to do that, okay, so I need to define the animation first. And then we'll get the animator of the humanoid and do load animation. And then I can just put in the tool.animation and get the ID of it. Okay, looks like I spelled something wrong here. Alright, so now that we have that, then what we want to do is check when the tool is activated or not. There's a few functions here. One, this is enabled, so that's just this property down here. And then this is an event, so this is when the tool is equipped. So when the player takes it out of their backpack into their hand, then this will fire. And I'll go ahead and just make this into a function to demonstrate this. And then the part that we actually care about is the activated. And then there's also deactivated. So this is when the player releases their click while the tool is activated. But I'll just be using activated here. And then I'll just print so that we know it is activated or not. Okay, so here's where we're actually going to want to play the animation. So that's how you do it, just like that. Okay, and then lastly, to make the sword do damage, we need to check if it was touched or not. So I'll do if the tool dot, let's see what I called it blade, right? So I would check if the blade was touched and then connect. So now we just need to check if the part that it touched was a humanoid. And then what we're going to do is just make the humanoid take some damage. I'll make it 10 damage in this case. And now, lastly, what we want to do is disable this touch event, because otherwise it's just going to keep firing very, very rapidly. So I'll just disable it like that, and then I'll wait 1 second and I'll enable it again. So yeah, if you don't do this, then the tool will, in just one swing, it will keep touching. So it might touch and do damage like 10 or 20 times. So that's why we put this in here, just to disable it so it doesn't do that. Alright, and now it should work if I did everything correctly. And I have this dummy here I'm going to test on. Okay, I clearly messed something up. Okay, so we actually don't want to use the ID in this case. We just want the animation in here. So now if I run it, you can see I can equip the tool, and you can see down here it's telling me that I equipped it, and then I can swing it and you can see it's telling me it's activated. And now if I go over here, you can see it's doing damage to him. So yeah, that's pretty much how tools work. Very useful.